All right, welcome everyone. All right, a couple of announcements. Some students came by and they said, "Hey, the class is so big. Can we do a discussion session?" Which I think is great. Now, here's the thing: the best time to do it is right after class. So we have a room tonight, right after class. Come if you want. You don't have to. But right after class, I got to go be a dad and pick up my son from his robotics class, and he's kicked out at 8:15, which means he's usually out in the cold for about 10 minutes. So I've got to leave, and we shouldn't put that on CPS is going to show up for me. So I got to leave right after class. But Eddie Campbell, where'd you go, Eddie? Who's a terrific graduate student. We have a room, Mendoza 203. So if you're interested in anything, you want to talk about anything, you want to criticize me, feel free. Mendoza 203, go for like half hour or so. No obligation, come if you want. It's just a chance to talk, okay? And so 203 in Mendoza. Two other announcements. I run, as most of you know, the Center for Citizenship and Constitutional Government. We run these student discussion colloquia. They're weekend discussion colloquia. And the idea behind them is we give you some reading, we have an interesting topic, about 15, 16 students, we feed you, and you read some things ahead of time, and then it's 100% student discussion. And we've been doing this for probably, 7, 8 years, and the response we get after almost every one is, "Oh wow, I thought this was what college was going to be like." Right? The whole purpose is for you to engage with their fellow students. So we have two of these seminars coming up. The first one we haven't done before. It's on February 27 and 28. So it's a Friday and Saturday. I think you come in Friday at 4 o'clock. You have a session. We feed you dinner. You have another session, 2 one-hour sessions. You're done by 7:30 or 8. The topic is American Society in the Place of Fiction. And honestly, I'm not even sure what we're reading on that one. The second one is March 20 and 21st. It's on Frederick Douglass. On politics, slavery, and the founding. And I've led that one myself, which the readings are extraordinary. So if you're interested in either of those subjects, or interested in, even if you can't make those dates, interested in doing one of these student discussion seminars, come talk to me or email Tyler Castle. You can find his information on the center, the CCCG website. It's constudies.nd.edu. Okay. One other announcement for the students who are just in class. Your pre-class posts, there's a lot of summary of the material in them, and I'm guessing you're communicating to me that you've done the reading. You don't need to summarize anything. I've done the reading too, and I know you're going to do it as well. Give me your take on it, right? Or give me your questions. Or if you don't have a take, or you don't have questions, or you don't have thoughts about it, explain to me why you thought of all the things I could have assigned, why those readings, right? There was Steve, Steve, the last name begins with a V, I just can't remember it. Who's that in here? Steve? Anyone? Yeah. So it was I'm sorry, I just can't remember the name. Look for Steve, last name begins with a V, his post, which I think is 100% wrong. Phenomenally interesting. And he was just giving his take on the reading. You don't have to agree with me. It's indifferent whether you agree with me or not. I'm indifferent to whether you agree with me or not. I just want you to think about the readings and then use the posts as a way to give your take or what you thought or the questions you have. It's a vehicle by which for you to communicate with me and your classmates, hey, these are things I'd like to address in class, okay? But there's no need to summarize the reading or try to show that you've done it, right? The readings aren't that hard. Or if they are that hard, it's not worth your time to summarize them in a handful of words, okay? Okay, so let's do a quick review since it's been a couple weeks, and then we have a lot to do today. I hope you enjoyed last week's lecture. There's actually one of the posts, I believe the gentleman here. Yep. Tell me your name again. Jock. Very critical of the lecture, and you should read his post. It was quite interesting. I thought quite thoughtful. And you don't have to do as much as he did, but it certainly caught my attention. I thought that was interesting. Okay, what did we do 2 weeks ago? We started off with the idea that the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. Equal in what sense? Well, from the James Wilson, from the Thomas Jefferson letter to Roger Waitman, they both say the same thing. Equal, everyone is born by human nature with the right to exercise dominion over his or her own life. Right? Why do we have the right of natural liberty? That right to run our own lives. In James Wilson, remember that passage from James Wilson we read? Because we were born with those capacities. We were endowed by our Creator with certain natural rights. Okay? Everyone with me? Okay. But the natural right to liberty doesn't mean you can do anything. Right? The natural right to liberty means you're free to do what you want within the bounds of what? This point is of fundamental importance. What does Wilson say? Within the bounds of the law of nature, the moral law of nature. Right? How do we know what is the moral law of nature? Or what C.S. Lewis calls the law of right and wrong? Right? How do we know that? Through our reasoning. The author of the moral law of nature, or the law of nature, is the Creator, and we understand or discern the law of right and wrong by our use of reasoning. Okay? So you know it's wrong to take something that's not yours, to steal, to run away in battle, right? To harm an innocent child. There are certain things that are wrong by nature. It's wrong to drive on the left side of the road via convention, right? We just decide, look, everyone's got to drive on the right or the left. And so you can't drive on the left. That's wrong. But we could have had everyone drive on the left, right? As they do in England. And then it would be wrong to drive on the right. Right? So it's wrong simply because of the law. But it's simply wrong to strike an innocent child, a baby. Aside from whether the positive law makes it right or wrong, right? That's what the law of nature is. So your natural right to liberty isn't a right to do anything. It's a right to do anything within the bounds of the law of nature. And most people say, well, that's just common sense, right? Okay. That's what the founders meant by the right of natural liberty. Okay. Now, because we're all free, but because we're not all good, and because we need coordination, we need a community, a political society. But if we're all free, how is government instituted, or how do some people get to rule? And that's, we said, consent. Consent follows from equality. And this is the point we left off right at the very end, right? We said, well, when did we consent? I mean, in 1776, you consented because you fought and you stayed and you... But how do we consent if you're an American citizen?
Selective service.
Well, you stay and enjoy the benefits and privileges and protections of the law. And for men, at least, we make you sign up for the draft. Right? Now, the theory is, and I think we still hold this to be true, if you were born here and said, I don't want to be a part of this political community, for whatever reason, this country is not for me, I want to leave. The theory is, at the age of maturity, 18, 21, sometimes your generation, 32, whatever it is. At the age of maturity, you have a right to leave. And I use the example of the Berlin Wall to communicate that. Because in East Germany, when they built the Berlin Wall, it was to keep people in. That is, you cannot leave if you're an East German citizen. You cannot leave. And that's why we said it was a tyranny. And this is somewhat abstract and it's tacit consent in the literature, but a real life example. Imagine you're in Ukraine right now, and you're 17, or your younger brother is 17, and is about to turn 18. This is all hypothetical. I don't know anything about the laws of Ukraine or anything, just to be clear. I'm making this up, okay? But imagine you're 17, or your little brother is 17, and is about to turn 18, and at the age of 18, you're sent to war, and that means you're sent to the front, and that means what? Well, good chance you're going to die. The theory of natural liberty, natural equality is, look, at that point, you can decide to join that society or not. You can leave. Now, there's no right to come back, but you get to leave. And if you stay, you take on the obligations of being a citizen. Now, we might say, well, you should stay and fight for your country, and maybe you should. But think about now that your little brother's not in Ukraine, but your little brother's in Moscow, and he's about to turn 18. And when he turns 18, he's sent to the front. And you think it's an unjust war. Should he have the right to leave? And the founders' philosophy would say yes. Right? Just because you're born in a regime, in a country, doesn't mean you have to stay there. No, you have to find some place to go. But that's what consent means. Okay? And it's an abstract philosophical issue, except when it's not. And there are real places right now where it's not. Okay? That's that's hopefully what you got 2 weeks ago. That's for a review. Okay, our subject for tonight is, we have to talk about slavery. And there's two ways I like to do this, and I chose one way and not the other, and I kind of regret right now that I didn't choose the other. Here's what the path we're not taking, and if we had an additional class is what we do. The best way I think to think about the founders on race and slavery is to read what they said about race and slavery. At least start there. And in my full semester class, I have a bunch of documents, and I emailed those to you this morning. Obviously, you don't have to read them. But that's at least where we should start. And there's like 20 documents, but they're very short, letters and short things. And if you want to pursue the question, that's the place I'd have you start. See what they said themselves. And it's interesting and complicated, and you have to interpret the documents. But I'd say make your own judgments. Okay. Another place, this isn't the second place, another place we could start is with the famous case Dred Scott versus Sandford. And that's where Chief Justice Roger Taney made his interpretation of the Declaration of Independence vis-a-vis slavery. But the greatest debate in American history about race and slavery actually occurs between Lincoln and Douglas. And because our time is short, I thought we'd use Lincoln and Douglas to get at this question. And it also gets at the question of what do we mean by democracy or self-government. It is, it's a political debate, and they're both running for Senate in 1858. And that's the context of the immediate Lincoln-Douglas debates, is the Senate race in 1858. But it's more than just a political contest, a Senate race. It's a philosophical debate about the nature of Republican government, about the nature of democracy. Or how many of you have read the first book, the Plato's Republic? Oh, good, fair number of you. The debate between Lincoln and Douglas is the same debate between Socrates and Thrasymachus in the first book of the Republic. And I see a bunch of heads nodding. Right? It's the exact same issue. So that's why I only get you for 4 classes. That's why we're doing these 2 readings tonight. Okay, the two readings, let me situate them. There are just two speeches. A speech that Douglas gave, Stephen Douglas, gave in 1858. So we're not even reading the Lincoln-Douglas debates. But these two speeches are the most efficient ways I know of to get the core arguments. So the speech by Douglas, and then Lincoln's famous 1854 Peoria address. And I use these speeches. If we read the Lincoln-Douglas debates, you'd see the same material. They say the same thing in the Lincoln-Douglas debates. It's not all they say, but the core arguments, okay? Okay, in Lincoln's speech, he gives a long political history, right? And I thought we'd start with that. And I'm just going to kind of cover some of the issues that Lincoln covers. And some of you probably know a lot of this, but it's helpful to set the context. Okay, so I want to start with just some facts about slavery in the Revolution. First of all, in 1776, before the Revolution, slavery is legal throughout the colonies, right? This map is, I think, the percentage of slaves in every colony at the time. Where's Lillian actually helped? Is that in 1770? Okay, all right. I now these are estimates that scholars make. They're not my own estimates that scholars make. About 30 to 40% of the South as a whole, the southern states. Further south, it's more. Only about 5% of the slaves population is slaves in the North. And for those watching at home, these slides are on the web page too. You can download them. Okay, what happens immediately after the Revolution? In the North, we have the first abolition movement, right? Pretty quickly, there's a movement for abolition. In some of the northern states, and you have to go state by state, there's policies like, okay, upon the age of 18, someone born into slavery or raised in slavery becomes free. In Massachusetts, the highest court in Massachusetts declared slavery illegal in the state. I think the decision was 1780, and by 1790, I might be wrong on that, but by 1790, there's no slaves in the state. Vermont, of course, Vermont is not an original 13 state of the 13 states, but Vermont's 1777 Constitution, so they drafted a constitution for the territory of Vermont before it was a state, abolished slavery. In the South, of course, slavery remains. There's a manumission law in Virginia in 1782, which allows for the legal emancipation of slaves without a certain procedure, approval of the state legislature. It wasn't so simple it wasn't just like you could free your slaves. Every state's laws were different. Okay, and then we get the Northwest Ordinance, first of 1785 and then in 1787. This covers where we are today. The Northwest Ordinance is Ohio, the Northwest Territory is Ohio, Indiana, parts of Minnesota, the upper Midwest. And in those federal territories, slavery is banned. And Jefferson, who's governor of Virginia, was instrumental in the Northwest Ordinance being adopted. Okay? So there is something of an emancipation movement after Revolution, at least in the North and in the Northwest, or now the Midwest. Okay, slavery and the Constitution. I mean, we could go on and on about this. Some basic points. Slavery is protected in the federal Constitution, right? There's no provision that says that, right? But clearly the Constitution anticipates that slavery will exist. I think the best interpreter of what the founders were trying to do is actually a former Notre Dame professor, Professor Michael Zucker, just retired a few years ago. And I'm going to follow his interpretation just because I think it's right. He argues that what the founders were trying to do with slavery at the Federal Convention was make it a state question. That is federalism. There's not going to be a union if the country as a whole has has to become all slave and all free. The North is not going to accept a union that's all free. The South is not going to accept a union that's all slave. South is not going to accept a union that's all free. Those are just the priors. And there's no effort for one side to try to persuade the other at the Constitutional Convention. Everyone agrees the only way we're going to have one union is if every state controls its own domestic institutions. And by that they mean slavery. Okay? If you read the Federalist Papers, which I'm sure everyone here has read some of them, if you read the papers that most people don't read at the beginning, the very first set of arguments in the Federalist Papers, Federalist 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, they're an argument why we should stay together as one country. Because there's real talk. Why don't we just split up? It's kind of like Europe in a way right now, right? Why, should we keep the EU or not? Why not just split up in 2 or 3 confederations? Maybe a southern, a northern, and maybe a mid-Atlantic. Kind of people that's so diverse actually live together in one nation. And the answer to that question is no, we should stay together, because if we don't, we're going to fight. And we're going to get countries from Europe trying to come in and divide us. So we need to stay together, and the only way we're going to stay together is if we agree to disagree about slavery. Okay? So the fugitive slave clause. Now, if your aim is federalism, how do you keep slavery as a state issue? And the biggest issue, at least from the Southern point of view, is the runaway slaves. Right? If you're trying to control, if you're South Carolina or Virginia or whoever, and you say, look, we get to control our state's policy on slavery, if the North does not return runaway slaves, is Virginia or North Carolina or whatever state, are they going to be able to control their own slave policy? And the answer is no. Right? And so the fugitive slave clause, that is, it's not actually clear who in the Constitution is responsible for returning slaves, but the idea is slave owners in the South have a legal claim, a legal right to have their runaway slaves returned. And that's in the Constitution, and it's to enforce the idea that every state controls its own policy on slavery. I think that is the strongest argument, definitive evidence in my view, that the Constitution clearly anticipates the existence of slavery. It's not to say that the Constitution is pro-slavery. The Constitution itself is federalism in terms of slavery. Okay. Now there is some argument that the Constitution in some ways, and the way that Professor Zucker puts it, and I think is pretty accurate, is the aim of the Constitution was to recognize that slavery was going to be slavery was going to be legal in some states, but it wasn't legitimate. Now, how do we get the not legitimate? They intentionally kept the word slavery out of the Constitution. And they talked about why. They said, because we don't want to sully the document. In Federalist 54, Federalist Papers, right? Federalist Papers are a defense of the Constitution. Federalist 54 is on the 3/5 clause and slavery more generally. And it's worth going just to look at the beginning. James Madison writes that paper, and he says, how would someone defend the 3/5 clause and the compromises on slavery in the Constitution? And he says, one of our Southern brethren might defend it in the following way. And then he has a quotation. That is, Madison won't defend slavery in the Constitution under his own name. Madison was a slave owner, but he won't defend it. And we know from his other writings, he thought slavery was unjust. He's still a slave owner, but he thought it was unjust. Okay, one other thing just to mention, the slave importation clause. The context here is who has authority over commerce with foreign nations? Who has that power? I mean, who's exercising that power all the time right now? Right? Tariffs. What are tariffs? They're regulations of commerce with foreign nations. Who's exercising that power? Well, the president. It's not clear that he has it, but the federal government has it, not the states. Right? That meant the federal government could, because through the power of regulating commerce with foreign nations, the national government had the power to ban the importation of slaves. And the compromise here is, in the Constitution, it says federal government cannot use that power until 1808. Now, it doesn't say the foreign slave trade has to be banned in 1808, but it can't be banned until 1808. In fact, it was banned on January 1st, 1808. Now, is the banning an anti-slavery provision? Well, obviously, in the one sense, yes. But what that provision did is it ensured a supply of slavery, right? And of course, if you ban imports if you ban the importation of a good, what happens to the price of that good? It goes up. So if you had a lot of slaves, and those slaves, you intend to produce more slaves, banning the importation is good for the slave owner. Okay? I just mentioned one other thing here. Article 4, Section 3 gives power to the Congress to regulate the territories, right? So who has authority over the territories? The land that we own that's not a state. And it's given to Congress. And we'll see that becomes a central issue in the Lincoln-Douglas debates, okay? All right. If anyone has any questions on this, this is just sort of background. This was what I was just talking about on legal but not legitimate. Okay, and federalism. Okay, let's jump up to 1820, Missouri Compromise. Anyone remember the provisions of the Missouri Compromise? Missouri Compromise involves what two states? I assume you can get the first one. Missouri and what? And Maine. Missouri and Maine want to both become states. Make sure I get my facts right here. 1817, Missouri applies for statehood. 1818 and 1819, fierce debate in Congress on whether Congress has the power to prohibit slavery in the territories. 1819, Maine applies for statehood. 1820, you get the Missouri Compromise. What's in the Missouri Compromise? Maine becomes a free state. Missouri becomes a slave state, and then what else? Anyone else know? You know where Missouri is, right? Where's Missouri on this picture? So, someone from California, who's from California? Okay, where's Missouri on there? Just left of the Mississippi River. It's green. Okay, what's the line that's kind of red that's below to the south of Missouri? It's a 3630 parallel. Why is that important in the Missouri Compromise? Yeah.
Other than Missouri, afterwards, any land in Louisiana purchase north of that had to be free.
Okay, so we have all this land from the Louisiana Purchase, which is sort of the orange, not all the orange, but I'm just trusting you know the land we got in the Louisiana Purchase, right? Starts in Louisiana and kind of goes northwest. And there's a question, what are we going to do with all that land? Right? And the Missouri, is it going to become slave or going to become free? And the deal is, okay, Maine is free, Missouri is slave, everything above the 3630 parallel in the Louisiana Purchase will be free. Notice that the South gets Missouri, which is above the 3630 parallel, as a slave state. And what's below the 3630 parallel, Arkansas, Oklahoma, eventually. The Missouri Compromise doesn't say anything about it, but it's presumed that will be slave. Everyone get the details of that? Okay. What happens between 1820 and 1850? Our next map. Mexican-American War, right? Texas, right? Texas is its own thing, and then wants to become part of the Union, and then it goes back and forth, right? I just lived it. Is the Texas Club of Notre Dame, is anyone here from Texas? Oh, this is just a small, Texans are very proud of being Texan, right? Because they had this moment of independence, right? So,
Country before state.
Country before state, yeah, that's right. What happens in 1849? Why are the San Francisco 49ers, who are not playing in the Super Bowl, I might add, because the Seattle Seahawks, my team, I'm from Seattle, are playing in the Super Bowl, I might add. Why are the San Francisco 49ers called the San Francisco 49ers? The gold rush. Gold is discovered in California when? 1848. Everyone's going out to California in 1849, hence the 49ers. 1850, so we have all this land acquired to the west of the Louisiana Purchase territory. We have Texas. What's in the Compromise of 1850? This one's a little harder. Anyone know? Yep. Fugitive Slave Act. Okay, what about it? The South gets a stronger fugitive slave clause, enforcement of the fugitive slave clause. Okay? That was the main thing the South wanted, yep.
California gets to be a free state.
California comes in as a free state.
And then the territories that they took from Mexico, so Utah and New Mexico.
Utah and New Mexico,
They become open to slavery.
they become open to slavery, and the presumption is the people of Utah and now New Mexico, Arizona will decide for themselves. Okay. But do you know this history? Yes, no? Give me, I don't know. I don't know what you know. A little bit, some of you? Okay. Okay. Kansas-Nebraska Act, 1854. Stephen Douglas proposes the Kansas-Nebraska Act. What does Stephen Douglas propose, and it becomes law? What does he propose? Yeah.
Kansas decides its own fate on slavery.
Okay, Kansas and Nebraska. Now, where are they? They're above the 3630 parallel and part of the Louisiana Purchase. What did they decide about Kansas and Nebraska? What did we decide about Kansas and Nebraska in 1820? They would be what? Free. And Stephen Douglas says they should be what? Should Kansas and Nebraska want to be states? Should they be free or slave? And what does Stephen Douglas say? Let them choose for themselves. They'll come in under the guise, what he calls popular sovereignty. Everyone see that's a change? Everyone just with me on the facts right now? Okay. I want to pause here. Just one other set of facts. I didn't make a slide. What do you know about the cotton gin? Do you know anything about it? And why would I bring that up right now?
It was made 1790 by Eli Whitney, and basically made slavery profitable again after the last because cotton's a really difficult crop to actually harvest properly. So the cotton gin made it a lot more effective.
The cotton gin was a technology that made, for our purposes, that made slavery far more profitable than it had been. And how do you measure this? Well, let me just give you these statistics. In 1790, the U.S. produced 3,000, the whole country, 3,000 bales of cotton. In 1810, so 20 years later, 18,000 bales of cotton. In 1858, 4 million bales of cotton. The scope, size, and profitability of slavery skyrocketed in ways no one ever anticipated in 1787. So I want to pause here and just follow me here for a second. How many of you think you're going to get a single dollar of Social Security? Okay, Pam Bradley, who's already collecting Social Security, thinks she will. A few others. Jim, maybe. Jim's pretty old, he probably will. How many of you think you're going to get Social Security? I see no students' hands up. None of you think you're going to get Social Security. Yet you're not out on the street. So you just think older people are fleecing you? Lots of heads nodding. This is the most enthusiastic response I've had in all my lectures. Tell me, how do you solve, so you clearly think it's an issue, it's a problem. How do you solve it? It's not that hard, right? You just lower benefits, raise the retirement age, right? You can probably put in ChatGPT and then you just index the retirement age and the benefits to how many workers there are, stuff, right? Some formula. So that would be the technical solution, something like that, right? Yeah? I speak as an arts and letters faculty member. Why don't we do that? Is it even an issue in Congress right now? Why not? Way in the back.
Old people don't want their benefits taken away?
Our distinguished elder citizens don't want their benefits taken away. Right? So what? It seems like you guys want their benefits taken away. Why is it not an issue? What's the political reality? Go ahead, just yell it out. Why? It's just impossible, right? Those who vote don't want to see it changed. In the number of politicians out there, what would happen if politicians implemented the technical change I just mentioned? What would happen to them? They're out, right? They don't even bring it up. Okay, I just presented you a problem, which is a real problem for you. At least you think it's a problem. And I presented you a relatively simple answer. And no one is going to do anything about it. So I want you to put yourself in 1854. I presume you're all against slavery and you think it's terrible. Tell me how you're going to solve that problem. What's your policy to solve the problem of slavery in 1854? And there is no easy technical solution. And the way of life of half the country depends on it. And they're willing to fight. So how do you solve that problem? You may know what's right or know the outcome you want, but tell me how you're going to get there. Because I saw no awareness of that issue in your pre-class posts. Could you imagine a problem more difficult? I mean, do you realize right now, what would you say the single biggest problem facing our country or the nation or I'm sorry, the world, or what would you say? Just throw some things out.
AI.
Okay? All right. Artificial intelligence. What do we do about that? Biotechnology. What do we do about the climate? If you think that's a problem. I mean, these are not easy to know what to do, right? And whatever your problem is, I guarantee you it dwarfs in comparison to what Lincoln and Douglas faced in 1854. And that's the context in which you need to read the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And I'm going to say something and you're going to deny it, but I actually think it's true. Most everyone in this room, and if not you, your parents, probably would have been in favor of Douglas in 1854. Douglas's position, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, we would have brought him to Notre Dame to be our graduation speaker. And why? Because Douglas is offering the sensible middle position. And here's Douglas's, we'll go through what he says, but this is the context of what he says. You tell me how we're going to get along as a people. What's your solution that a significant number of people in the South, in the Mid-Atlantic, in the West, and in the North would agree to? If you want to use fancy recent terms, what's your overlapping consensus? And Douglas says, I have a proposition for you. And not only do I have a proposition for you, this is what we've done. We've been divided about slavery from the very beginning, from day one. Founders didn't figure out a way to solve this problem. So what did we do in 1820? We compromised. What did we do in 1850? We compromised. What am I proposing now in 1854? Well, a compromise, but those compromises have a principle behind them. And what is the principle? The principle is democracy. I mean, don't we have a democracy initiative right now? Isn't that what we're dedicated to? And who's more in favor of democracy than Stephen Douglas? Because what's his principle? The people want slavery? Let them have it. The people don't want slavery? They don't have to have it. Let every state and territory judge for itself. Okay, you think slavery's wrong? It's fine. Don't vote for it. But they think you're wrong, at least in some parts of the country. Right. This is on page 22, right? If there is one principle dearer and more sacred than all others in free government, it is that which asserts the exclusive right of a free people to form and adopt their own institutions. Or this is page 27 of your readings. The great principle and right of the community is to judge and decide for itself. And one more on page 28. And this is what he would say to you. It's no answer to this argument, the argument he's making about popular sovereignty. It's no answer to this argument to say that slavery is evil and hence should not be tolerated. You must allow a people to decide for themselves whether they desire a Maine liquor law. Anyone know what that is? Maine liquor law? Prohibition. Maine started prohibition. You allow them to decide for themselves what kind of common schools they will have, what system of banking they will adopt, or whether they will adopt one at all. You allow them to decide for themselves the relations between husband and wife, parent and child, guardian and the ward. In fact, you allow them to decide for themselves all other questions. And why not upon this question? When you put a limitation on the right of the people to decide what laws they want, you have destroyed the fundamental principle of self-government. Isn't self-government rule by the people, which means rule by the majority? That's what democracy is, isn't it? Sorry, I skipped ahead. Okay. So he says, Stephen Douglas is the first pro-choice politician. Let the people choose for themselves. Who's to decide whether it's right or wrong? And if we disagree, let every state and territory decide for itself. And you know what the benefit of that is? No civil war. Because if I say manifest destiny, does that make any... What's the southern border of the United States going to be? In 1854, do we know where it's going to be? How far south are we going to go? If you're against slavery, look, we just took Texas. How much further are we going to go? Or are we going to take Canada? I mean, every American today thinks if we want it, we can just take it, right? Greenland? Like, we don't know where our borders are going to be. The country's expanding. And how are we going to decide? Are we going to be at the brink of civil war every time there's an expansion? So he's saying, America, I'm offering you democracy, and I'm offering you a way for peace. Right? I can see the video on the Jumbotron now. Fighting for democracy. And if you like stability, you like peace, how many of you have been to war? Because war is hell. If you don't want to go to war, and you want to embrace democracy, this is the path. You don't think Notre Dame would have bought that in 1854? Let me pause. Questions? Thoughts? Please, sir.
Can't you claim that he was kicking the can down the road and passing the ball?
Okay, the question was he just kicking the can down the road and passing the buck? But he would say, well, no, I'm giving you a way to resolve every future dispute. People of each state and territory will decide for themselves. Right? So here is a procedure which will end all our future disputes. It's the rules of the game. And not only are they good rules, it's the fundamental principle of self-government. Yeah?
Why did he need to present any new process for Nebraska that already had a decision from 1820?
Yeah. Well, he had to present a new process because Nebraska, supposedly, the question was settled. Right? And it was settled by the Missouri Compromise. Right? So he's destabilizing the status quo, but he's saying, this is the right principle. This is how we should decide these questions. Okay, I don't know if we can do Lincoln in 10 minutes. Probably not, but we should try. How many of you have read Lincoln? Do you still have to memorize the Gettysburg Address in 8th grade? How many of you might memorize the Gettysburg Address in 8th grade? Okay, fair number of you. Good. All right, that's usually all Americans, I think, used to at least in the North, memorize the Gettysburg Address. I don't know. I'm not sure about the South. Right. And it used to be an American thing you did. Okay. You can, Lincoln is worth your attention and study. A few biographical facts. I don't know if you know anything about Lincoln. He spent some time here in Indiana. He had about, historians say, somewhere between 3 to 9 months of formal education. He studied the Bible and Shakespeare. And if you know Shakespeare, you can see all sorts of Shakespearean references in his speeches. And Euclid, extraordinarily carefully. The PLS students like to think he would have been a PLS major, right? He was really a self-made man, came from nothing, was a one-term congressman. He didn't lose, but they sort of had a rotated out of the Whig Party, and so he did his time in Congress. He was a lawyer. He was out of politics, and he comes back into politics in 1854. He is basically a no one. And he comes back into politics in 1854, and he gives this speech. And according to Lincoln, what he sees, he actually says, Stephen Douglas is proposing to the American people the same thing that the serpent proposed to Eve. And Lincoln's goal is to make America worth saving. And the apple is this idea of popular sovereignty. So Lincoln's task, as he understands it, is he has to explain to the American people why this proposal, this offer by Douglas, is a betrayal. Okay. Now, this speech is long and complicated, and if we were to really do it properly, we'd do it in a group of like 15 students, and we'd read it carefully, and we'd go through all the different arguments, and there are various arguments. Now, Lincoln says some things that people don't like to hear, right? He says, look, I'm whatever about equality. I'm not for political equality. Right? I want you at least to keep in mind, this is not a disquisition. He's not writing a dissertation. He's making political arguments that have a political intention to move a people from one place to the next place. And here's where you have to think, what are the arguments you would make if you were trying to save Social Security? What is or reform Social Security? You only have a certain window in which you can operate, right? Everyone following me here? And Lincoln points to this, right? He points to popular opinion. The politician can only operate within the realm of acceptable popular opinion if you actually want to govern. Okay? You have to keep that in mind. You have to keep that in mind with Douglas, too, right? Okay. Anyone want to try to summarize the key of Lincoln's argument against Douglas? Because Lincoln says Douglas gets popular government exactly wrong. Anyone want to take a stab at it? I didn't see anyone do it in the pre-class post. Go ahead, yeah. It talks about the consent of the governed, yeah. That's part of it. Okay, slaves aren't participating. Slaves haven't given their consent. That's part of it. Good. Let me find the quote. This is on page 10 and 11 of the handout. I'm going to read part of it. He says, I trust I understand and truly estimate the right of self-government. My faith in that proposition that each man should do precisely as he pleases, with all which is exclusively his own, lies in the foundation of the sense of justice there is within me. Remember that James Madison reading on property? Madison says almost the exact same thing in that 1792 essay. Okay? I extend the principle to communities of men as well to individuals because it's politically wise and naturally just. Okay? The doctrine of self-government is right, absolutely and eternally right, but has no just application as here attempted. Or perhaps I should rather say that whether it has such just application depends on whether the Negro is not or is a man. If he is not a man, why in that case, he who is a man may as a matter of self-government, do just as he pleases with him. But if the Negro is a man, is it not to that extent a total destruction of self-government to say that he too shall not govern himself? When the white man governs himself, that is self-government. But when he governs himself and also governs another man, that is more than self-government. That is despotism. The Negro is a man. Why then my ancient faith teaches me that all men are created equal, and that there can be no moral right in connection with one man making a slave of another. That is the key passage. Anyone want to try to articulate it? What's he saying? What does Douglas get wrong? Yeah, sir.
Douglas's premise is that the country is made for white people.
Douglas's premise is the country's made for white people. True.
That's why not
That's But if the slaves were given the vote and then the white majority voted for slavery, would it then be legal or just? Is it simply that the slaves haven't participated? Lincoln would say that would be unjust too, right? It's not just a matter of participation. It's not just that the slaves haven't consented and had the chance to voice their opposition to their own enslavement. Let's go back to the beginning of class. What is the right of natural liberty? It's the right to do what? To direct your own life within the bounds of the natural moral law. What is the right of a people acting as a community? The right of the people is to govern their own lives, the community, through laws, subject to what? Subject to the natural moral law. Why should a majority rule? Why does the majority get to rule? What's the foundation of majority rule?
It's like the argument for Seneca, it's the advantage of the stronger is more of those that have power.
That's Douglas's argument, isn't it? It's the argument of Thrasymachus. But why do we say majorities get to rule? Right? If you're about to go out to dinner with 5 of your friends and no one's paying, and I don't know, 3 of you want to go to Chipotle and 2 want to go to Five Guys, but you're all committed to going together, where are you going to go? Well, presumably to Chipotle. But why does everyone get one vote? Because you're all equal. The foundation of majority rule is equality. Because we're all equal, now where do we get equality from? Where does our equality come from? Are we equal because we said we were equal?
It's like endowed to us.
Endowed by our Creator, that all men are created equal. Equality, human equality, is the foundation of rule by the majority. But that means there are some things majorities can't do legitimately. Just like an individual in their natural liberty cannot violate legitimately the rights of others, the natural moral law. What Lincoln is saying, actually, majority rule is not our foundational principle. What is our foundational principle? All men are created equal. And this is the problem with Stephen Douglas. Give me 2 more minutes. He would destroy our attachment to the Declaration of Independence. That he would destroy the moral foundation of the country. Right? He says this, Lincoln says this at the beginning and at the end. And just for the sake of time, let me go on. Again, you can find these slides online. Our Republican robe is this is at the end, towards the end. Our Republican robe is soiled and trailed in the dust. Let us repurify. Let us turn and wash it white in the spirit, if not the blood, of the revolution. Let us turn slavery from the claims of a moral right back upon to its existing legal rights, the arguments of necessity. Now, why would Lincoln say this? Lincoln believed if the country stayed true to the principle that all men are created equal, that would necessarily put slavery on the course, what he said over and over, on the road to ultimate extinction. But the American people had to believe it was morally wrong, that is, slavery was morally wrong. Look at the very end. If we do this, we shall not only have saved the Union, but we shall have so saved it as to make and keep it forever worthy of the saving. Douglas promises you peace, Lincoln says, but it's premised on injustice. Our aim is not simply to save the Union, but to make it worthy of saving. And that raises the question, what is it we're saving? What is the fundamental principle of the Union? And what's Lincoln's answer? All men, black as well as white, are created equal. Okay, thanks for letting me go over. Mendoza 203 if you want to keep on talking.